Hello again for our second episode of You Are My Boro, our second live You Are My Boro today on deadline day. And just as we were about to press record, I got a message through on Twitter to say, I don't think your second live transfer blog video is going to be that long. Well, there have been a few developments since this morning.
Well, you changed your top for starters.
That's the one. And to be fair, I had a message about that just before we started as well. Have I got that to hand here? Basically, I can't words to the effect of I can't concentrate on anything other than Dom's jumper. So I changed it. I toned it down a little for the second one. Morgan Rogers' has moved to Villa, was confirmed just after we finished, as expected. There no confirmation at the Villa end of contract details or anything like that, although suggestions were this morning. It's till June of 2029. Not that really concerns Boro now or Boro's fans. There have been a couple of other exits. Bryant Bolongo has headed to Ebbsfleet on loan, and Callum Kavanagh has gone to Bradford City on a permanent deal. We'll start with that one, Scott, Kavanagh, because we mentioned that this morning. I guess there was a bit of surprise from some supporters I saw on social media that it was permanent. But I guess from Boro's perspective, Kavanagh's 20-year-old. He's not 17 or 18-year-old. He's only made 3 first-team appearances, all kind of fleeting cameos. His contract was up at the end of next season. If given the injury problems and the injury list Boro have had and the shortage of centre forwards, if Kavanagh was going to get his chance, it would have come in the last couple of months, wouldn't it?
Well, that's what it feels like now, doesn't it? I mean, it feels like Boro have made a decision on Kavanagh that he's not, they don't think that he's going to kick on sufficiently to trouble the first team in the foreseeable future. So if that's the decision that you've made, then it's okay. What do you do with him? Do you send him out on loan? Probably knowing in the back of your mind that we haven't got a Josh Coburn situation here, and that even if he comes back at the end of that loan, he's almost certainly not going to be in and around the first team squad even next season. Well, if that's the decision that's been made, and that's the noises that we're hearing from the Boro end, that's the thinking, then if you've got the opportunity to get anything for him in terms of moving him on, then it probably suits you, and it's probably the best thing for Kavanagh's career, because if Kavanagh goes out on loan when realistically there's not much chance of him having a route back at Boro come what may, then that doesn't really do Boro any good, but it doesn't do him any good either. So I think it's the right thing. I mean, it's interesting because he obviously has scored goals at under 21 level, that there's clearly a kind of player of some degree in there. But as you rightly say, Boro have had and Carrick have had enough opportunities to get him in and around that first team lineup so far this season. If they felt that he was anywhere near, they clearly don't think that. Hence why he's gone out to Bradford.
And Bradford's a good loan move. A good move for him, isn't it?
Going well under Graham Alexander. Classic sleeping giant in League Two, aren't they? I mean, they've had a poor season again this season, but they're a side that you always think if they can get it right, they're a bigger club than League Two, aren't they? So, you would imagine he will get a chance there. He's a bit different to Andy Cook, who they've had there in the last few years, isn't he?
Yeah, I remember that. You were there in the summer, weren't you?
I was, yeah.
When Cook gave, was it Rav Vandenberg, one of his early games?
One of Vandenberg's first games, yeah. And he pretty much kicked him up a height from start to finish. Yeah.
A bruising early encounter. Brian Bolongo, Ebbsfleet, been in and around it a couple of times on the bench this season, but again, it's an opportunity for him to go there and hopefully get some football. Left-sided defender, left back, with Luke Thomas coming in. Clearly, opportunities were going to be hard to come by for Bolongo. He wasn't going to get a kick in the first team, was he? In the second.
Well, it wasn't going to get near it. No, and I think it's hard to read too much into these kind of loan deals, but probably the fact that he's gone to a side battling for survival in the National League maybe gives you a bit of an indication on where he's at the moment as well, because you see these players in and around it in pre-season, and Bolongo played in a number of games, actually looked quite good in a couple of them, I thought. So you're kind of thinking, right, well, how far is he from Boro's first team? Well, if he's getting a loan move to a team that's 21st in the National League, that would suggest he is a good way away from Boro's first team in the eyes of Carrick and the rest of Boro's coaching staff. So Yeah, he needs to go out and play some football. He's not really had that opportunity yet. It'll be interesting to see how he does down there. And then I guess, again, there'll be a decision to be made on the summer in, well, is he anywhere near actually getting towards our first team? Because, again, he's going to have to do really, really well, you would imagine, at Ebbsfleet to really knock on the door. Because we've seen with Hayden Coulson, he's had a couple of reasonable loan spells. Admittedly, the one at Aberdeen didn't really work, but he's never really been able to get near to establish himself in the first team, has he? That's the challenge for Bolongo, and it starts at Ebbsfleet.
In terms of income, said we wait basically. We're what 5.5 hours now until the deadline. As we said this morning, for anyone who watched, Boro's priority today was clearly trying to get a centre forward. As things stand, there's been no one through the door. As things stand, it's been very quiet in the Championship, hasn't it? It still kind of feels as though we're waiting for the day to take hold. I'm not sure it will. Across the board, I mean.
No, I think you're right across the board. I mean, let's start with Boro. So, they, as we kind of alluded to this morning, they have had targets, but it's a pretty small pool. And thus far, as you've alluded to, I don't think any of those targets have gone anywhere. Largely because nobody's really gone anywhere in the Championship. Now, there are deals starting to happen. It sounds like Kiefer Moore's going to Ipswich. Sunderland look like they're signing Callum Styles, a midfielder from Barnsley. So there are bits and bobs starting to happen. But in terms of Premier League strikers leaving on loan, which is the market Boro have been in, they've just not been there. And as we said earlier this morning, I think what Boro haven't wanted to do is take a bit more of a gamble on a permanent signing from abroad, because that's a really difficult deal to do in January for lots of different reasons. One, in terms of getting the player settled and into the swing of things halfway through the season without a pre-season. Two, the clubs you're trying to sign these players for will invariably slap on a kind of January premium, so you're probably paying over the odds before you've started. So Boro didn't want to do that, so hence it's been Premier League loans they've been looking at. And I think by the time the window closes tonight, we're not saying it's impossible yet, because we are still hearing that there are deals that could potentially spark into life. Kind of one in particular, I think, that Boro have been looking at all day. But as things stand, those players are just not leaving the clubs that they're at, and I think that's going to be the story of the window. That when the window closes, like you say, right across the board, the number of deals will be dramatically down because clubs are just not wanting to let these players leave this month.
Do you think this is a knock-on effect? There's a few factors at play, but do you think one of them is Everton's points deduction earlier this season, and suddenly the fact that Premier League clubs were well aware of the fact that the Premier League were clearly taking profit and sustainability rules very, very seriously, and then suddenly Premier League clubs have been reluctant to maybe risk certain deals as they would have done in the past. And then because of that knock-on effect, players that might potentially have been allowed out haven't been.
I think it's a lot of different factors. I think that's definitely one. There's no doubt that clubs in the Premier League are much more reticent now to spend the kind of money that they probably wouldn't have thought about spending in the past, because the profit and sustainability rules are really tightening what they can do. And like you say, whereas in the past, clubs might have been tempted to push them and say, well, okay, what's the worst that'll happen? We'll get a slap on the wrist. I think now clubs, you're seeing it in Newcastle, they just do not want to run the risk of a points deduction for breaking FFP rules. So yeah, there's not been the churn that there normally is in the Premier League. I think we've touched on it before. The Africa Cup of Nations, the Asian Cup have been a factor because clubs have lost players, still have players away. I mean, Boro know it themselves, obviously, with the two Aussies. They have players away, so the squads are lighter, so they're not wanting to let fringe players leave, whereas maybe they would have done if those tournaments weren't on. And then, as I've also mentioned, and again we see it with Newcastle here in the Northeast, there's a number of Premier League clubs that just have a chronic injury list and have had for the last 2 or 3 months, and so don't want to let players go at the minute until they get 3 or 4 injured players back, which is maybe another month down the line. So I think it's lots of different reasons. But I do think that you're right. The Premier League's FFP rules and the fact that they are now, pretty serious about enforcing them might rein in transfer business for the next few windows?
A couple of comments. Thanks to those who have got in touch in the comments, and to those who did this morning. First things first, from Peter, do you think Paddy McNair will leave with his contract up in the summer? McNair is one of those uncertain ones, isn't it? Where earlier in the season you felt that a January move for McNair was if not likely, then certainly possible. But obviously, before his injury, he played a lot of football. He developed into not developed, but he'd become a really established, important player again in Carrick's team this season. Now, as things stand, there's kind of no indications that he's going to be signing an extension. But equally, there's been no indications throughout this month that McNair was going to leave. Clearly, he's been injured. He's just returned to the squad in the last couple of games, but hasn't yet played. I guess it's a watch this space one with McNair, isn't it? Between now and the end of the season, he is one of the higher earners from what we gather. Obviously, he signed when Tony Pulis was in charge, when Boro were paying quite significant fees for players. If McNair was to stay, then it'd almost certainly have to be on reduced terms. We'll have to see how it plays out, won't we, over the next month or two?
I think the one thing we can confidently say on McNair is that he will not be offered a new contract on the terms that he's on now. I think that is crystal clear. So, will Boro offer him a deal on reduced terms? I definitely think that it's possible, because he's a very useful squad member for lots of different reasons. He's experienced, he's reliable, he can play in lots of different positions. Michael Carrick's clearly valued having him in and around the squad, for all that he's not really been necessarily a nailed-on starter for most of the time under Carrick. But it will be on reduced terms. So the question then is, A, is McNair willing to accept those terms? And B, if he isn't really, then is anyone else going to come in and offer him more? I think that's what it'll come down to. What Championship clubs want Paddy McNair in the summer and are potentially prepared to pay him more than Boro are going to pay him? I think that will be the question, because I can certainly foresee a scenario where Boro offer him another year, maybe even 2, probably more likely a 1-year deal on reduced terms. Is McNair going to take that, or is someone else? Stoke have been linked with him on innumerable occasions in the past. Is someone like that going to come in and offer him 2 or 3 years on more money? Because if that happens, Paddy McNair will leave Boro, won't he?
Andrew Wheatley, and we've got another comment from Andrew, which we'll discuss in a minute, is asked for the Forest to buy an Akpom. Fabrizio Romano's tweeted in the last 5-10 minutes or so that Forest are indeed exploring the possibility of signing Chuba Akpom. It's interesting, isn't it? Because how many times this season have we discussed Chuba Akpom, Ryan Giles, Aaron Ramsey, and Cameron Archer, the 4 high-profile players who left Boro in the summer? Giles is obviously at loan now, at Hull now. His move to Luton didn't work out. Chuba's obviously had difficulties at Ajax, wasn't helped by the manager and sporting director situation at the start of the season, when I think Ajax had the record-equaling or record-breaking worst start to the season. Aaron Ramsey has struggled for game time at Burnley, and Cameron Archer obviously has been playing at Sheffield United, although in recent weeks that hasn't necessarily been the case. But it clearly hasn't gone to plan. Sheffield United have struggled. I'm not saying all 4 of them should have stayed or joined Boro in the summer, but the moves, for varying reasons, haven't worked out for them, have they?
No, and it's interesting, isn't it? It kind of comes down to, maybe we're going to see a bit of this with Hayden Hackney in the future, and a player like that. Sometimes what you've got, it's just clicked and it just works. It's the right club at the right time, and if you decide that you're going to turn your back on that, it doesn't always work out, does it? And like you say, there's various different reasons for that. Like you say, Akpom has gone into an Ajax side that are clearly a way off what the great Ajax sides of the past have been. Cameron Archer's joined a team that were always going to struggle at the wrong end of the Premiership table. Ryan Giles hasn't been able to get a game at Luton. So there's various different things, but you're right. I mean, none of those 4 yet have gone on to achieve more than they achieved at Boro last season. And so you are thinking, well, should they just have stayed? Should Chuba have stayed with Boro, and should Giles have turned down that move and come back to Boro, well, it's easy to sit here and say that now, you know what I mean? But it does just make you think with someone like Hayden Hackney, let's say, I don't know, Spurs come in for Hayden Hackney in the summer. It's going to be incredibly hard for him to turn down that kind of move. And yet, who's to say in a year, 18 months' time, we won't be looking at him leaving somewhere on deadline day and saying, well, in hindsight, it was pretty obvious he was going to struggle to break into that Spurs team, and he's just been sat kicking his heels on the bench for the last 12 months. He would have been far better staying off at Boro and being a legend, even if it was in the Championship. They're the decisions players have to make, aren't they?
Yeah, and it's easy to be wise after the event, isn't it? But it is so important to get those big moves right, because I think in the case of Akpom, Archer, Ramsey, and Giles, they all had real momentum in the summer, didn't they?
Yeah.
And they've all lost it. Now, if you look at, I think Ramsey and Archer, they're young players and they've got plenty of time on the sides. And as we said this morning, the suggestions that Archer could well return to Aston Villa anyway if Sheffield United go down. I don't know what the crack is with Ramsey. Giles, I mean, Luton, for a team that was going up to the Premier League and was clearly going to spend a lot of the season defending. And
didn't feel right, did it?
It didn't, no, that never felt like a good move. Akpom, you can completely understand why he fancied a move to Ajax, can't you? But again, that hasn't gone right for him. We'll see how that works out. Just another comment from Andrew. We've moaned for years about buying high and selling low. Now we have a system in place which may keep the club running more efficiently, which is great to see. It touched on what we were talking about this morning, didn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. We did. We kind of discussed that this morning, didn't we? That even if Boro end up this window without getting the striker, I still think you've got to say that the window has once again proved that there is a structure and there is a thought process and there is a system in place now that enables Boro to plan strategically for the future, but also be flexible and adept enough to make signings that are needed for the here and now. We've got to remember that Finazaz came in right at the start. Boro have really high expectations for him. Think that he will develop into a really, really good player. Had already shown signs of that at Plymouth. Is ready already for the Championship. Luke Ayling's come in to plug the gap at right back that clearly injuries have created. And Luke Thomas the same on the opposite flank. Now, in an ideal world, Boro would have signed another striker. And that then would have been an absolutely superb window. As it is, I don't think you can throw too much flack at them for not being able to get that striker in when, as we've touched on just a couple of minutes ago, nobody's been signing that type of player this window.
Just on this from David Jackson, isn't it premature to judge Boro's new transfer policy or strategy until we see where we end up at the end of the season? Again, let's see how the last five hours or so of the window plays out. But I think regardless of how the next few hours play out, and regardless of how the next few months play out, if Boro were to miss out on the top six, I think what one major difference this season is Boro already look like they're going to be well set for next season. The makings of the squad are already there. There's not going to be an overhaul in the summer, is there? There's not going to have to be a complete revamp of the squad. I think Boro, whether they sign a centre forward or not in the next few hours, are pretty well placed to kick on in the second half of the season, given the form of recent weeks and the fact they're getting key players back in the coming weeks, Marcus Forss as well. But regardless of how it plays out, it feels like there's going to be the base there, a springboard to further strengthen in the summer when it is easier. It is easier in the summer, a lot easier to bring in a permanent centre forward, maybe from overseas like Latte Lath, for example, than it is in January, and certainly in the last couple of days, hours of the January window.
Yeah, absolutely. What it has avoided is the kind of complete overhaul that they'd had to do in the last summer window. I mean, in terms of judging where Boro end up at the end of this season, well, what's success and what's failure in that would be we all want to see Boro get promoted, but I think we also accept that 4 of the 6 playoff places are probably pretty much already sewn up. So just getting into those playoffs is going to be a fair old battle. and then winning the playoffs is then going to be a massive battle in it. So if Boro don't get promoted this season, I don't think that's necessarily a failure, for all that Michael Carrick quite openly said at the start of the season, promotion is the ambition. I think what Boro would say is one of the big ambitions and one of the big ideas of putting this kind of structure and process in place is we want to be regular challengers for promotion for all of the next 2 or 3 seasons. We don't want a graph that goes up and down, up and down, up and down. We want to be every season right up there in amongst it. And, the evidence at the moment would suggest that things are in place for that to happen. Now, there's a lot of imponderables. Hayden Hackney can be sold. Michael Carrick could leave. You're going to have to bring in a new head coach. That's going to be upheaval. There's going to be ups and downs along the way. But I think that is where Boro are wanting to get to. And clearly within that, the aim is to be up there challenging for promotion every season. But winning promotion in this league is really difficult. And this season, it looks more difficult than ever because, like you say, all things being equal, the 3 teams that have come down could probably finish first, second and third. So straight away, you're up against it as a club like Boro who are rebuilding without parachute payments.
I was going to touch on that. Mark Robbins was on 5 Live on Monday night, and he was talking in general about the job he's done at Coventry. But he said quite clearly, that this is the hardest I've known the Championship, the best Championship I've known. And I think it's very rare that the 3 Premier League teams that come down end up finishing in the top 3, as might well be the case. And I think it's also rare that you get a team coming up from League One just as strong as Ipswich have been this season. That Sunderland last season showed that it's not out of the ordinary really for a team to come up from League One and to compete. But to be as strong as Ipswich have been, to live with Leicester for the first third of the season, a Leicester team that looked like they might well go on to break Championship records. So I think.
And also, sorry, just to jump in there, also to have the means that Ipswich seem to have to be able to continue investing, because, if they get Kiefer Moore today, that's probably the biggest deal that's going to be done in the Championship.
Yeah, absolutely.
So for them to be able to do that just shows, the kind of the backing and the size and everything that there is there.
But I think already, if you look ahead to next season, and again, this is absolutely me not writing off this season, but already if you look at next season, who looks likely to be coming down? Well, Burnley, Sheffield United, and then one of possibly Luton, Everton, Nottingham Forest. That Burnley, you would imagine, are pretty well set to do what Burnley have done in the past, where they're probably one of the best 22 teams. If they go down, they'll be well placed to go back up. But none of them are going to be as strong as Leicester have been this season, perhaps even Southampton. And you look at the top of League One as well, Portsmouth, Derby, Bolton, whoever else, clearly none of them look as...
Doesn't feel like...
Obviously, it's only January, things can change. But none of them, you wouldn't back any of them to do what Ipswich have done, have you, this season?
No, I would agree with that. But, like I say, I don't want us to come across as really negative and this season's done and we're writing it off, because I still think Boro will be banging the playoff mix with the squad they've got now. I do just think that, it's going to be hard to win promotion for any of the teams currently outside of that top 4.
With the deadline at 11 p.m. at one point late in the evening, do we think nothing is going to happen? Basically, I want to be in bed by 10 p.m. at the latest. I know that feeling.
We've all been there.
Was it Leeds who posted that time, "Don't go to bed yet," or words to the effect, or are you still up, or words to the effect of that, and then didn't follow it up with a sign?
Hammered because it was like some youth player re-signing or something, wasn't it? I think, listen, never say never, because we've all been there, gone 11 o'clock as this deal gone through, hasn't it? I think what I would say now is we're at 6 o'clock now. I think if Boro were going to do a deal, it would have to be for a player that they'd already done most of the negotiating and talking about. It wouldn't be something completely out of left field where they've got to talk personal terms, they've got to get a medical. So I don't think you can sort all of that from now. So I think if there is going to be a late deal, it's going to be one of the 2 or 3 players that they have held kind of preliminary discussions about, but so far have not been allowed to leave, or where a deal's just not been feasible. I mean, I think we're heavily saying it's much more likely that nothing will happen than something will come from nowhere. But that's not to say it's completely impossible, because we do know that there are players where talks have taken place. It's just they're not going anywhere at the minute.
What you're saying there is the potential of a late wild card, as Globe Thrusters said. It's a very quiet window all round. Hope Boro pop up with a late wild card. We'll see. These things do happen. These things do happen in the final hours of the window. But I completely agree with what you say there. To start from scratch on something now feels extremely unlikely, doesn't it? Now, Boro have done the groundwork on several players over the course of the month. It's just whether any of them fall really in the last few hours. That can depend on various things, can't it? As we touched on. Just a few more before we wrap up. Andrew Wheatley, thanks Andrew for the comments throughout this video. We need Dieng back more than we need to sign a striker, in my opinion. Michael Carrick is due to speak to the press tomorrow afternoon, obviously ahead of the Sunderland game on Sunday, which we haven't touched on at all yet. We'll do a video specifically looking ahead to that at some point on Friday. But fingers crossed, we might get some indications on the injury front there. Isaiah Jones, obviously being one of them after he was ruled out of that Chelsea game, and Seny Dieng. We don't know the severity of that one. Clearly, he went away at the African Cup of Nations. Had to come back because of the thigh injury that he suffered late in the win at Swansea in December. So it's wait and see. It's wait and see on that one, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. I mean, do we think that he'll go straight in ahead of Glover? I think he will. I think he is still first choice. I mean, Glover's again had some mixed kind of. He's had some very, very good games. He's made some really good saves, but there have been increasingly probably moments. It's harsh because they've shipped 6 at Chelsea and really none of them were his fault, were they? But he has looked slightly shaky on occasion. So I think Dieng is Boro's number one. I think Carrick, put an awful lot of faith in him in the first half of the season. We've said on previous vids how important he was at stages in terms of Boro's passing out from the back and stuff like that. So I think Dieng remains the number one. It's just when is he fit? Hopefully we'll get some kind of an indication on that tomorrow.
And Patrick Wheatley says we need 2 players in, I think. Let's see then in the next 5 hours. It's going to be a busy close to the window if Boro to get 2 in the last 5 hours. Never say never. We'll see how things play out. We'll be on the live blog on the Echoes website all the way through until the close of play, 11 p.m. And we'll bring you live news, reaction and analysis if and when any late business is done. Stick with us on there and we'll have analysis and reaction throughout the day tomorrow. Coverage from Michael Carrick's press conference at Rockcliffe. That's tomorrow afternoon. And then obviously all the build-up to the Sunderland game on Sunday. Thanks for watching. Thanks for joining us this afternoon. And again, for joining us if you did this morning. Do subscribe on YouTube if you haven't already. If you listen to us on podcasts, and rate and review. Thanks, Scott. Thanks to you for watching and listening. Enjoy the rest of your deadline day.